All right, in this video we are going to talk about animation. And animation has come a long way since the days of Buck Rogers. And the main thing was, in the old days, they used to build the model and then they used to have a still camera and they'd move the model in front of the camera. Well, obviously this created some sort of bizarre looking and certainly not very realistic animation. And if you have not seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, then you really should see it. It's the 1968 movie about a mission to Mars, and you just need to see it. But what was important in terms of animation was this was the very first time that they built the model, and then instead of moving the model, they animated the camera. And so as the spaceship appeared to move through the scene, what was really happening was they had a camera on a dolly, and the camera moved across the model, making the appearance of the ship moving. If you recall the very first Star Wars Episode 3, that very first scene where the Millennium Falcon comes out of the upper right corner, and it's making the deep roaring sound, which of course it couldn't do because there's no sound in space. But hey, that would make a pretty boring film. Anyway, point being is that this is the technique we're going to use here. So we've got our model that we built in the last video. And so the first thing we want to do is make sure that we go into our camera. We go into our camera and we go back to perspective. Okay, this is really important because otherwise it will look really weird. Okay, so perspective is important. All right, then the next thing we want to do is think about how we want to animate this particular text. One of the easiest things to do is just do a rotation. So we want to make the model appear like it's spinning in space, but in actuality what's going to happen is we're going to use the camera and we're going to move the camera around the scene. Okay, so we want to open up in our windows and we want to go find scenes. Okay, and scenes are essentially like keyframes. So if you remember from the Premiere Pro, a keyframe is simply a moment in time. And anything that happens at that moment in time is what's recorded in the keyframe. The same thing is true here in the situation where you need to make all of your changes and then you make a scene. If you make a scene and then make all the changes, you won't see them because you won't have recorded that. Okay, so let's take a look at how we might want to make this happen. All right, the first thing we want to do is sort of move that off. And then maybe we want to go to camera, front view. Okay. And then we want to zoom in a little bit. Okay. So we never get to see the camera. Okay, we are the camera. And so whatever we see in our viewport here is what the camera is seeing. And so if we want to simply spin make the MAT 120 look like it's spinning in space, all we do is we create 4 keyframes. So, okay, so if we want to start it here, this is a great place to start. We just hit the plus button right there. And we add a scene. And we'll just save the new style, create scene. Okay. So now that's our first keyframe. If I make any other changes here, this is still the keyframe. So it doesn't really matter unless I make a new keyframe. So the orbit tool is pretty important here. So the O key gives us our orbit tool. And then that's one way of creating it. Okay, let's talk first about just doing it with the camera. Let's go to our standard views and let's go to the right. Okay, we'll make a new keyframe. Okay, so now that keyframe has recorded the camera there. And then we go to camera and we go to back. And we make a new keyframe. And then we go back to camera and we say left. And we make a new keyframe. You don't need to come back to the beginning because it will loop automatically. Now, just to sort of test and see what we got, you'll notice that we ended up with these scenes up here, which is kind of fun. I'm going to get rid of my orbit tool for a moment so I don't muck things up. I'm just going to use my pointer tool. And if I go to scene 1, you'll see the animation play. Okay, scene 2. Okay, that'll stop there. 3. And then 4. Okay, this isn't incredibly creative, but it gets the job done, and then it will automatically come back to scene 1. Now, we can also, in the view animation, we can first hit settings, because settings are kind of important. Okay, so the settings window pops up. And what happens here is that we have a transition time, which is how long it takes to get from scene to scene. The longer the time, the slower it moves, right? The faster the time, or the less time, the quicker it moves. Okay, so we also have the thing called slide delay time. And generally speaking, for what we're doing here, we want this to be smooth, so we usually will want it to have it be at 0. Okay, so I'm going to just start really fast. And I'm going to put a 1-second delay just to show you what happens. And then we go into view, animation, and play. It has to load it up here. And now you see how it stops? That's the delay time. Okay? So if we want that to not delay, we'll just use that down and it'll just automatically update the animation. So nothing is really ripping along, right? Is it too fast? Yeah, maybe. It depends. So then you can just use your up and down arrows here to slow or speed up your animation. So say we want to slow it down, we'll add a little time. And add a little time, so now it's 2 seconds between each keyframe. And maybe add a little bit more. We're going to get really slow, right? So it's up to you, and you have to determine what you'd like to do with your animation. Okay, so this is a very simple tool. All right. So now let's kind of do something else. I'm going to just stop that from playing, and you can just stop it by clicking on any one of the scenes, and it'll just stop at the scene. Okay. So now I'm going to move this little controller down for a moment. And if you want to delete scenes, you simply select the scene, and then there's a little delete button right there, and you can delete it. Or what you can do is you can update the scene with this right here. So say you don't like the fact that it never ever changes, but you want it to start here. So here I'm on scene 2, and this is what you can do. So I'm going to use the orbit tool, and I'm going to use the orbit tool. There we go. And I'm going to go to scene 2. And say I want to do something different to it. You know, maybe I want to do something strange. You know? And so then, if I don't record it, nothing's going to happen. The scenes are recorded as they are. So I want something to happen, and then I'll just go ahead and hit that little update button and then say, update everything. Just say update. And then now the scene is different, right? Here's my scene 1. And notice all of a sudden it really changes the effect quite a bit. I'm going to speed this up a little bit here so we don't have to wait so long. And so then my scene 2, whoa, right? And then it goes back to scene 3, which is we hadn't changed that. So say you want to do something different with that. And so then you change the orientation like so, and then you update your scene, and then scene 2, whoa, right? Whoa, right? And then in scene 4, let's do something different. Go to scene 4, and again, using the orbit tool, let's do something kind of cool. You can also use the hand tool, H. And so these are the primary tools that you can use. You can also zoom in and out with your scroller. And so there's a lot of other, those are your primary tools. You can move the scene around. You can zoom in and out with your scroller, or you can use the orbit key to orbit. All right. So I'm thinking around here. I don't know what I'm doing. So we'll just hit the update on that. And then you hit your play. There's your scene 1. Okay. And then scene 2. Whoa. Scene 3. Whoa. Scene 4. Whoa. Scene 1. Okay. So it's easy if you want to just get some quick animation to use your camera views, and that gives you 4 keyframes. Or you can do all kinds of fun and interesting things. Okay, so this is essentially the project as you'd like to create it using the very basic techniques. All right, so we'll look at, in the next video, we'll look at some more fun advanced techniques.